Multinational corporations depend on a high level of importation of commodities for the production process. Few local inputs are required. Multinational corporations are exploitative of natural resources, cheap labor, and lenient labor laws, e.g., Reebok used child labor in Pakistan. There was a boycott against use of Reebok products because of their actions. Big companies try every way to expand the profit margin because they are not interested in sustainable development, but rather the profit incentive. Occupational stratification. Multinational corporations create low-level, laboring jobs. The technological and managerial jobs are reserved for their own people. Outflow of capital, repatriation of wealth. Multinational corporations perpetuate underdevelopment by giving no real advancement to the nation, but instead only exploit their wealth. Large companies become politically important. They can support a government and heads of a nation if the prime minister become puppets, i.e., companies can own a nation. Economic distortion in society. Multinational corporations pay their employees high salaries. People who have the same qualifications will lobby the government for more money. Internal disruption in society. Multinational corporations are famous for environmental degradation due to slack laws. Multinational corporations are known to deal in bad faith, i.e., they withdraw at the slightest hint of a change for the economic situation of the country. E.g., Ansimical, examples of multinational corporations. They exist mainly in the mineral extraction industry, bauxite in Jamaica and Guyana, gold mining in Guyana. Companies such as BP, Atlantic, Shell, BG extract oil in Trinidad and Tobago. Multinational corporations also exist in the financial sector, such as banking, insurance, retail, PriceSmart. These multinational corporations provide many positive impacts, but their negative impacts are greater in number, i.e., there is more loss than gain. We depend on them because we lack money, technology, resources, and education to do what they do. Distributional sector, associated with the movement of goods, and it is promoted significantly by globalization. The distributional sector is broad in its scope. It includes several kinds of industries. Consider the movement of goods. There is insurance, transportation, advertising, warehousing, security, and retailing. The distributional sector does not sell a tangible product. They are essentially myriad services. As the distributional sector improves, there is creation of numerous jobs and stimulated economic activity, but at the same time, cultural imperialism and outflow of cash improve. Globalization and franchises. Franchises are names that have become globally famous and associated with a particular good or service. Franchises allow Caribbean people to become entrepreneurs using an international standard. E.g., some businessmen in Trinidad rented the KFC franchise. A franchise is never sold, but instead it is rented, i.e., a person enters into a contractual obligation with the franchise holder. Franchises bring metropolitan standards into the Caribbean, and this contributes to diversity. Franchises also mean that there is an outflow of cash because parent companies take a part of the profits, annual subscription fees, globalization, and technology. In order for globalization to become a reality, technology is needed. Through technology, the world is made into a single interdependent marketplace, mechanization. The greatest impact in the Caribbean is via the internet and computer, globalization and ideology. Throughout Caribbean evolution, it is seen that we were influenced by metropolitan ideas and ideology, e.g., land, religion, political structure. This is cultural imperialism. Via the media, we are more greatly being influenced. This means an erosion of Caribbean cultural identity and in its place a metropolitan one. But not all ideologies are bad, e.g. the Caribbean's attitude towards environmental and animal rights, women and children, rights, sexual differences, and gender orientation are changing, globalization and social justice. Nothing brings negative publicity like infringements of social justice. Because of the media, the world can know about injustice. People can get a voice on a global scale, and this may promote higher levels of transparency. We are adopting lifestyle ideologies, especially among the young. They idolize and emulate Europeans and American lifestyles, sexual promiscuity, divorce, non-lab, traditional sexual behavior. Because of globalization, popular movements and lobby groups have increased globalization and feminism. Feminism as a concept did not begin in the Caribbean, but came in via the movement of ideologies. Feminism is a position that women should be treated equitably, and they are of equal worth in society. From a developmental point of view, this is important since it means empowerment. In the Caribbean, there are a few feminist platforms. Caribbean Association for Feminist Research and Action. They have three main purposes: to create awareness of feminist issues in the Caribbean, to promote women's place in society, and the law, to promote women's health issues, women's actions for new directions. 1. This is not a political group, but it can have a political impact. It is similar to a group such as the Highway Reroute movement. WAND seeks to achieve the same purposes as CAFRA. Because of globalization, social justice rights have improved. People have the opportunity to access a voice and have visibility on a global scale, so there is a higher level of inclusion. Module 2, Specific Objective 4, Integration. Movement. Integration is based upon historical commonalities, producing a basis for interaction and working together for a common, bigger purpose. All Caribbean countries face the same challenges of the past: exploitation, underdevelopment, same globalization challenges. Additionally, with respect to British West Indian BWI nations, we have the same systems of government, politics, language, and economy. Caribbean countries look at each other as insular, looking at ourselves as quote, us alone, end quote. Thus, our mindset is exclusive rather than inclusive. So the first challenge for integration is our cultural outlook. Integration is an important part of sociocultural and socioeconomic reality. Caribbean nations are too small politically and economically to have any impact on the world. As such, it is sensible to seek alliances for our own protection. The West Indies Federation, 1958 to 1962, was a union of self-governing territories which are nations in their own right, e.g. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, Barbados. The Federation was the first integration platform that came into the Caribbean and was based on British decolonization design. The Federation was sensible in many ways. It was based on our similar characteristics, concept of strength in numbers, and the idea of same challenges suffered. Federation presents an opportunity for Caribbean nations to become more independent. It takes a long period of planning, and the Federation, which is a joint political body, comes into being. Reasons why the Federation failed: distance and communication. There were no cell phones and there were unreliable landlines. Hence, there was no collective decision-making. Lack of coordinating development. Some nations were wealthier and thus advanced and developed faster than others. Parochialism and xenophobia. Parochialism is the feeling of contempt of people of other nationalities, whereas xenophobia is the fear of strangers. Personality conflicts. There were many strong leaders, each a leader of his own nation. In the Federation, they had to put away their views and take orders from one man. This didn't work well with everyone. Funding of Federation. The Federation had bills to pay. At the time, some nations had differing levels of economic well-being. Some countries had to bear the weight of funding the Federation, and this was thought to be unfair, e.g. Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. Monetization of economies. In order to have a common currency, each nation had to be theoretically monetized, else inflation would have occurred. The Federation provided a platform for a free trade area, FTA. But for a FTA to work, there must be a common currency, either WI/Federation dollar. This became challenging to evaluate resources, migration challenges. People from the small islands began to storm the wealthier, larger nations due to a lack of opportunities, and hence a search for better opportunities. Some people came in Trinidad to work in the oil and gas industry. Deciding on migration policies became a challenge, since one country didn't want to take on the burdens of other nations. Observations. Even though the Federation came to an end, it was a very sensible ideology, because it offered Caribbean nations the opportunity for unification, economic cooperation, a level of protection and interdependence. Soon after the Federation collapses, there is the movement towards independence. In 1962, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago gained independence. Among the important institutions catalyzed by the Federation are University of the West Indies, UWI, West Indies Cricket Board, WICB, Caribbean Meteorological Services, Federal Supreme Court of the Caribbean, CCJ. These institutions help to bring the Caribbean closer as a society, people, and cultural identity. Even though the Federation fails, Caribbean nations recognized the need to cooperate on certain levels. The Federation was a political and economic union. The Federation fails because of political reasons, but it is still recognized there is need for economic cooperation. We must still cooperate on money, trade, and global finance matters. After the Federation, there are several regional economic platforms, 1965 to 1962, CARICOM 1973, CSME late 1990s till today. These agencies are principally economic, but it still required governments to work together. Caribbean Free Trade Association, FTA. There are a few major objectives. Managing body for CARIFESTA, diversification of trade. This is important because we need to rely on each other in the mouth. FTA to avoid dependency upon metropolitan nations. We benefit from each other. However, Caribbean nations have to get into the manufacturing sector since it is critical for the FTA to function. Intensification of trade between Caribbean partners, i.e. source materials locally within FTA. Before approaching metropolitan nations, introduction of Common External Tariff, CET. Caribbean nations should agree on how much tax they charge for their products, e.g. 10% tax on local alcohol and 20% tax on foreign alcohol to encourage locals to buy from each other. Sport and cultural platform brings the Caribbean together via sport. e.g. Carifta Games, an important pre-qualification platform for Caribbean sports. Caribbean Community, CARICOM, has same objectives for Carifta. The difference is that Carifta is an internal arrangement, but CARICOM is a body that represents the Caribbean to other FTAs. CARICOM was important for representing regional trade on an international basis in the past. CARICOM has been able to represent the Caribbean. e.g. in the early 2000s, CARICOM represented the Caribbean to the EU and WTO. But CARICOM was still able to secure the EPA. CARICOM allows for cooperation in creating economic policies among governments. CARICOM is made up of government representatives since it needs political cooperation for an economic platform. Caribbean Single Market and Economy, CSME, is the latest incarnation for trade, investment, and cooperation strategies. The CSME is still being rationalized and seeks to regulate the movement of people. Each regional institution has achieved certain successes, but the integration of the Caribbean has several unique elements to it that needs to be considered. Each agency introduces a new angle into integration. Objectives of CSME: to promote full employment of labor in the Caribbean, to promote free movement of the factors of production, to promote diversification of Caribbean economy, to promote cooperation among governments. Single Domestic Space, SDS, allows for creation of the CARICOM passport. This breaks down the restrictions to Caribbean territories. Ideally, people, money, and skills can move. This promotes development and opportunities. The harmonization of laws. The CSME has to find a way to harmonize laws among Caribbean territories, such as trade, migration, and taxation policies, so that people can move freely. Non-BWI nations have already agreed to this, e.g. Cuba, Haiti. This seeks to avoid unnecessary conflict of interest in business matters. They would adjust FDI and import/export policies, challenges of SEAL, work permits and restriction to movement. In order to access a work permit, certain criteria must be met, e.g. university education, a job must be waiting for you, and you must be a sportsman, businessman, or a media personnel. To get a work permit, you must prove that you are not going to be a leech. There will be stratification, exclusion, and this is a reason for antagonism against the system. Difficulty for harmonization of laws because of income tax regimes in different nations. Persons without work permits may experience double taxation, so there is a loophole in the policy. Corruption, e.g. sale of passports for a Caribbean nationality in a foreign country. Tax evasion. CSME is not foolproof to tax evasion and money laundering, so people seek to hide their money. Resistance to the right of ownership. Some Caribbean countries have certain restrictions on how non-nationals may acquire land. Trinidadians are considered alien in Jamaica, so this causes restrictions. Differences in value of currency, salaries, payments, and taxes. Some people gravitate towards other nations, and this causes social welfare burdens. The CSME has not yet come into full operation. Organization of Eastern Caribbean. States OEC operates on several different levels, i.e. economic, political, social, and judicial. OEC. seeks to harmonize trade laws and judicial processes in order to promote cooperation and interdependence. OEC is informed by the small size of island nations which comprise it, e.g. Antigua, Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They all share the same kinds of geographic, meteorological, geological, and economic threats such as hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and lack of money. In coming together, they support each other, so the liability is spread across many nations. Strength in numbers and a support system is created. Two major achievements of the OEC are economic. OEC successfully implemented an economic union, i.e. they have crafted laws to harmonize trade and taxation. They created a common currency, the Eastern Caribbean Dollar, ECD. This is important, since the CSME and CARICOM has not yet done so because of economic differences. This harmonization of laws and strength of currency aid the OECs in stimulating FDI. A nation with a strong economy attracts investment on a global scale. Judicial. OECs achieved judicial union and created the EC, Supreme Court. This court handles matters of the highest order and matters pertaining to discrepancies among members. The EC Supreme Court has achieved what the CCJ is still trying to do. Association of Caribbean States, ACS, is an even larger entity than the OCS and CARICOM because it incorporates even member states from Central America, such as Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Colombia. The objectives of the ACS are economic and trade in nature. In order to promote economic opportunity and a common interest, ACS promotes sustainable tourism, natural disaster preparedness, regional security matters, and the ACS provides the biggest platform for regionalism. The ACS faces certain challenges, also met by CARICOM: its language barrier, English, French, Spanish, varying levels of development, difference in political ideology. University of the West Indies, UWI, comes out of an act from the Federation, and it serves 17 English-speaking nations. The aim of UWI is to unlock the potential of the Caribbean human resources in order to promote development opportunity. Within the region, there are 3 campuses spread across the Caribbean to make UWI more accessible to all nations. They are located in the wealthier nations, i.e. Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Barbados. Initially, UWI was specialized, e.g. Trinidad and Tobago engineering, Jamaica, geology, and medicine, laws and humanity. This specialization promoted cultural exchange. This was to reduce the cost on each program. However, as demand grew, UWI adapted UBY over time, expanded into several other countries in the fields of education, but not necessarily tertiary education. Business Learning Centers, Agents for Reutech, SBCS, UI, has several objectives and achievements, promotes cultural integration, development of human potential, countering cultural imperialism, reducing dependency upon foreign skills and academic institutions, job creation for academic elite. This inhibits brain drain, bring positive international attention as a center for academic achievement, to add new research/knowledge to the world, attempts to remain relevant, to diversify its curriculum, e.g. environmental issues, maritime industry, diversification into tourism, and challenges facing UBI. Cultural, imperialism in academics. People perceive metropolitan education as a higher intrinsic value. The smartest of the Caribbean attend these schools, and this creates a negative stereotype of UWI. Poor, international recognition, low international ratings, space, technology, and facilities. Some students are on a long waiting list, so they seek opportunities elsewhere. Because of a lack of space, human development is restricted. In order to have the greatest level of relevance in education, the greatest levels of advancement in technology is needed. The use of this new technology is challenging. Local-based international universities, high cost of education. Trinidad and Tobago subsidizes education, but nations which are too poor cannot do so. Some students will not be able to attend university. In order to get credibility, UWI must attract the brightest people, e.g. inviting Stephen Hawking. Underperformance in new research. Universities must produce work. Lack of publications. University is promoting regurgitations instead of new intellectual ideology. Brain drain. Caribbean Examinations Council (CXC) was established in 1972. It was one of the first acts of CARICOM, and it became effective in 1973. CXC has similar intentions, benefits, and challenges to UWI. CXC is a direct method to empower through education. Therefore, CXC empowers the Largest numbers in ways to add to development. CXC becomes migration. CXC seeks to optimize alternate routes for empowerment. CXC faces self-inflicted integrity issues such as testing material that are not on the syllabus and errors on the examination paper. CXC uses secondary school teachers to do the marking of the exams. Examining bodies such as GCE has paid markers. Hence, there are leakages of papers and matters of integrity that needs to be investigated. Issues with the internal assessment IA process. Standardization problems, and it is open to scrutiny. West Indies Cricket Board, WICB, the Caribbean's governing body for professional and amateur cricket. It was formed out of an act of the Federation. WICB organizes cricket in the region and negotiating as an arbitrator for international level games. WICB allows integration in sports. The WICB has achieved a high level of success in bringing the Caribbean together through sports. Cricket is a spectatorship game. This increases visibility on a global scale. Since the BWI nations had exposure to cricket, it was exclusive to BWI nations, and it draws upon the talents of their natives. Through participation, nations feel as part of a bigger enterprise. Because of inclusion, the WICB and the composite WIT create sources of pride. The WIB becomes an agent of empowerment, and there are many benefits: development of talent and skills of youth. WICB requires venue, resulting in infrastructural development of a nation. This stimulates economic activity, jobs, upstream and downstream industries. WICB creates a model, a paradigm for youth to work towards. So, this creates role models for the youth. Local role models aids to defeat cultural imperialism. To generate an income for Caribbean countries. Because of the matches, there are fees and ticket sales, etc. To mobilize the private sector involvement in the game, e.g. sponsorship. To promote professionalism in cricket, making players ambassadors for the Caribbean. To promote an identity for the Caribbean on an international basis. Challenges of BIB, parochialism and proportion. Proportion is the composition of the team, and this may reflect a larger portion of one team, rather than players from all nations. People lose confidence in the WICB, and there is a risk in losing the fan base. Allegations of corruption, mismanagement, and nepotism, lack of funding, competition from foreign series. Players choose to play for a T20 franchise in foreign countries rather than local tournaments. The lucrative T20 promises quick money and reputation. Players choose this since a sport career is short. Lack of technology. Metropolitan nations implement high levels of technology in the practical and theoretical aspects of the game. Caribbean nations are playing catch up. Confrontation between players and board. In the 1990s, the players formed the WEPA, West Indies Players Association, since the WICB was not paying match fees to the players. So the WePay gives players a platform to challenge their decisions. Match fixing. Some players are corrupt. Marlon Samuels was fond of this. Caribbean Tourism Organization, CTO, is a regional agency that includes the Caribbean and Central American member nations. The main task of the CTO is to make tourism into a more viable industry in the Caribbean and to make tourism contribute more greatly to development. The CTO has many responsibilities: assessing global trends in tourism and advising governments on how to improve their tourism product, to make arrangements with airlines, cruise, ships, operators, hotel chains, etc., ensuring a Caribbean destination is part of the itinerary for companies, to create forecast for the tourism industry. Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, comes into being through CARICOM. Its main focus is to become a business, trade, territorial, and supreme court for the Caribbean. Ideally, the CCJ is meant to adjudicate for CSME and CARICOM and to replace the Privy Council. However, there is a lingering doubt in the CCJ, as not all Caribbean nations support the CCJ. Advantages of the CCJ creates a level of identity for the Caribbean, gives a sense of judicial independence, allows for working of CSME, generates employment opportunities. Lawyers, judges can get opportunities on a regional level. Immediacy. There is more rapid justice than the Privy Council, and relevance. Judgments are more true of a Caribbean cultural identity. Creates a culture of jurisprudence and intellectual traditions. Challenges facing CCJ. Lack of funding. The Privy Council. The Privy Council comes with several centuries of credibility and reputation, whereas the CCJ is not even 10 years old. They lack the accumulated knowledge of centuries. Lack of jurisprudence. lack of confidence by Caribbean nations that create a negative stereotype. Parochialism. All judges who work in the CCJ will have a nationality. Some matters will go one way or the other. Allegations of corruption. Nepotism. Regional Security System is a virtual organization comprised of both police and military personnel. It is an agreement rather than a physical entity. In times of need, nations will contribute employed police. The RSS, as a treaty measure, aids in events of natural disasters or insurrections. RSS is a security measure, especially important for the smaller nations since they don't have enough manpower. E.g., in 2004, Trinidad and Tobago sent regiment, police forces, and CPEP to help clean up Grenada after Hurricane Ivan. Also, in 2010, in St. Vincent, for Hurricane Tomas and the earthquake in Haiti, Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, is a lending institution that emerges out of an act from CARICOM. There are many functions, which are exclusive rather than inclusive. There are many restrictions in terms of lending, e.g., little money. The CDB lends money to aid in development of business, stipulate investment in that, borrowing nations, promote business diversification, support agriculture and rural development, promote equity through education and training, promote gender equity. Challenges of CDB, lack of capital. Too many requests from countries and agencies within the Caribbean. The lending is built upon conditions. CDB states what borrowers can buy. Some Caribbean nations are more in need. Therefore, it creates platforms for favoritism. Issue of rejection. Some nations may not get money. Caribbean Institute of Media and Communication, CARIMAC, is housed in UW Jamaica. Its main function is to promote media, journalism, and communication in the Caribbean. It is attempting to make the Caribbean smaller through the news. It also becomes a journalism school in the Caribbean, giving new avenues for academic achievement. Because of CARIMAC, there has been creation of Caribbean broadcasting systems, such as Caribbean Broadcasting Union and Carib Vision. Module 2, Specific Objective 5, Contribution of Sport. The human and sustainable development paradigm are based upon the premise that every human resource is optimized and the true potential of every individual is achieved. Sport becomes another avenue for empowerment. Sport gives a unique opportunity to those who are athletically gifted. In this way, it allows an individual an opportunity to contribute to national development because as a human being, he is developed. In the Caribbean, the value of sport is underestimated. Benefits of sport. Sport adds to the physical well-being of a nation. Increase in health of a nation. Higher morale. They can contribute to more of development. Increased productivity. They are independent of governments. Medical supplies. Therefore, there are savings for the government. Sport can engage in income generation, resulting in economic enfranchisement, and this stimulates upstream and downstream industries. Sport can be the basis for a tourism industry. Tobago utilizes the Tobago Classic, a cycling race throughout the island. Investment in the economy, building stadia, employment opportunity, and the increase in the multiplier effect. Sport adds FDI. E.g., in 2011, the Tobago Fishing Festival attracted the producers of Mercedes-Benz to the island, and they sponsored prizes. Sport has an invisible psychological impact. Psychological stability is important, and sport is a famous stress reliever. Increase in morale. Psychological stability, efficient worker, less antagonistic person, higher levels of productivity. Education opportunities attached to sport. Sport scholarships, i.e. mixture of sport and education. Caribbean people become empowered because of sport prowess, allowing for increased educational opportunities. Creation of international reputation, e.g. Usain Bolt, George Bovell. Sport and development of Caribbean identity. Sport can contribute to identity building on a micro and macro level. Sport is spectator-based. It brings people together. Sport can act as a common denominator and work to counter stratification in the Caribbean. Sport can promote development by changing negative attitudes within the society. The team becomes representative of a school, community, nation, and region. Sport acts as a cohesive agent, allowing all levels of society to interact based on the love of the sport. Sport may operate as a platform for regional integration. The Federation has failed. CN Carifta has issues, but the YCB has not failed. In global games, the participant of one Caribbean nation becomes the participant of all Caribbean nations. FIFA World Cup, Germany, 2006, when Trinidad and Tobago participated. brought recognition, positive awareness to the region on an international basis. There is increased international funding, e.g. sponsorship, aid from sport nations. In best-case scenario, tourism is gained, role models for the younger generation is promoted, Caribbean nations get placed into global history, e.g. Jamaica. Track and field sport is associated with high levels of discipline in the player, e.g. fair play, recognition of rules, sportsmanship. This is good because it is the same attitudes a nation needs to have high levels of productivity. Through the media, the world has become aware of the Caribbean, which attracts FDI, income generation, employment, and advertising. Sports can thus stimulate upstream and downstream industries. Difficulties sport faces in the Caribbean. Sport needs venues. The Caribbean has not invested heavily to make physical infrastructure for sport. This is because there are always other important things to do. Each hospital, roads, lack of funding. International class games don't come to the Caribbean. Lack of technological facilities. Games are not televised. Spectatorship is lost. Sport is not commercially viable. Sport needs a venue to be televised. Some countries have gained sport venues. E.g., in the 1990s, contributions from FIFA ensured that there are international class stadiums built. Illegal industries, e.g. gambling, doping, match fixing troubles the world. Sport, not many in the Caribbean. Lack of world-class coaches. Best advice needs to best persons. Many countries have invested into different personnel for different aspects of the game. However, in the Caribbean, there is only one person to do all pieces. Poor attitudes. The attitudes of the players and spectators are poor. In order to play sports, one needs discipline. In the Caribbean, sport is associated with the feeding culture, The players carry a vibrancy of Hard Feederson, which could damage their reputation and that of the sport. This brings the sport into disrepute. The spectators have little patience with the players. When the team enters into a losing slump, spectators lose confidence, become unsympathetic, and condemn the players. This negative attitude does little to encourage the players. Spectators can be branded as ungrateful. The attitude to sport is linked with a cultural attitude. Parents have a contemptuous attitude towards sport. They perceive sport as recreational rather than professional. Module 2, Specific Objective. 6 Intellectual Traditions. There is a false perception that the Caribbean is a backward intellectual place, since it is claimed that the Caribbean has not produced anything of intellectual worth. The things we put forward are not seen as phenomenal. We add stuff to the world of economics, politics, medicine, literature, etc. Pan-Africanism, a social and political philosophy associated with the work of Marcus Garvey, is a platform for promotion of equity for people of African origin. It becomes a platform for redress from oppression for all oppressed people. Pan-Africanism seeks to redress 500 years of stigmatization. Pan-Africanism promotes African consciousness. Positive propaganda, creating awareness, sensitization, knowledge, and becomes anti-imperialist. Pan-Africanism is linked to Garveyism and requires Africans to recognize their worth and contributions to global advancement. Pan-Africanism calls for the unification of all Rastafarians. Bob Marley is, thus, a proponent of Pan-African ideology. Pan-Africanism seeks to change the global perception of Africans, but it is also associated with certain negatives. Physically rebellious movements, e.g. Black Panther Movement, Nation of Islam in USA, and Black Power Movement in Trinidad and Tobago. These are based upon an extreme Pan-Africanism. Martin Luther King built his Pan-Africanism on peace walks. They have been Pan-Africanism thinkers in the Caribbean, such as Martin Carter, Bob Marley, Edward Kamabrath. Negritude bears certain commonalities to Pan-Africanism. However, Negritude is a literary propaganda platform about creating awareness of the suffering/exploitation of Africans. Negritude explores the human condition of alienation and exploitation through literature. Martin Carter created Negritude, and he shows how Europeans oppressed and continues to oppress Caribbean people. Proponents of Negritude include Earl Lovelace and Derek Walcott. Industrialization by invitation is an economic concept initiated to attract FDI. It is important for Caribbean development because it finds a way to access capital, skills, technology, and machinery. Without investment, development is stagnated. Industrialization by invitation creates an avenue for development. All Caribbean economies suffer the same problems. Industrialization by invitation acknowledges these drawbacks and attempts to solve them. These problems include lack of money. Caribbean societies are characterized by historical problems, e.g., dependency theory, lack of mineral resources and skills/education. The Caribbean is heavily dependent on labor jobs that are low-yielding and does not empower an individual to earn a proper standard of living. Industrialization by invitation is the brainwork of a St. Lucian economist, Sir Arthur Lewis. He creates recommendations for promoting industrialization by invitation, which he calls incentives for investment, pre-constructed, ready-to-use physical infrastructure, e.g. buildings for companies, and support infrastructure, e.g. road networks, airport, electricity, water. The guarantee of political stability, stable system of government to promote FDI, lenient taxation policies / tax exemptions, profitability of company increases / tax holidays, a period of time without tax, subsidies, e.g. a government can help set up a company, encouraging others to come as well. Benefits of industrialization by invitation, employment creation, reduced dependency on government resources, improved quality of life, redirection of capital, increased income tax generation, higher levels of productivity and morale in people, improved international reputation, stimulates upstream and downstream industries. Any new industry makes the distributional sector stronger. New businesses. This increases corporate taxes and spending and creates positive inertia. Marxism and neo-Marxism. Marxism puts forward a socio-political and socio-economic division between those with power and those without. Marxism is the philosophy that looks at this division, whereas capitalism is the actual division. Neo-Marxism describes a more subtle situation. The bourgeoisie class does not have to be present, yet the control exists. This is seen in IMF policies. Caribbean feminism. Feminism is an ideology that attempts to find equity for women. Feminism has specific reference to gender and development in the Caribbean. Feminism is a collection of ideas aimed at attaining visibility / equity / empowerment / opportunities for women. Feminism does not seek to subordinate men, but it is about equity. According to Amartya Sen and Mahbub ul Haq, the human development paradigm and the sustainable development paradigm both incorporate empowerment. Then feminism is a platform for empowerment. Feminism is an ideology that has to be enculturated in every next generation and is a constituent part of the social justice factor of every society. The Caribbean comes from a history of social stratification that becomes a legacy of division that still occurs today. Women are oftentimes subordinated in society. Anytime a group in society is alienated, there is creation of a minority. Class. Women are disenfranchised. They occupy a lesser status. In the Caribbean today, women are following an international model. They are among more visible roles in society. Consider in the family, women are opting to be single parents because they are educated, empowered, and confident. Women of today are much more proactive than those in previous generations. Empowerment via education becomes a reality. Educational mobility, occupational mobility. In this feminine ideology, women are seen as just as capable as men in holding prominent leadership positions in business, society, and politics. Kamla Persad Bisesar, women make better workers in many areas. Ejab business heads, they have analytical minds and doctors, better attitudes. Many women are outperforming men in previously male-dominated professions. Women are finding a voice in society. Because of the many popular movements and education, they become more visible. Any kind of empowerment for any group is developmental in nature. Indo-Caribbean thought. The East Indians are the last labor group to arrive in the Caribbean and have been relegated to the stigma of manual labor. In the Caribbean, the East Indian is still attempting to solidify accommodation in society. The East Indians contributed to the socio-cultural diversity, economic and philosophical Caribbean environment. In an economic view, the East Indians toiled and helped to build the economy of Caribbean societies. The real impact of the East Indian can be seen in the post-indentureship economy. They entered into entrepreneurial activity to be economically enfranchised. The East Indian turns to the land for the basis of economic enfranchisement. The East Indians look at land as the only true empowerment. Since Chamars couldn't own land, when they do get, they feel empowered. The East Indians see ownership as a means of social mobility. The East Indians reject the caste system because it was scripted and adopt a Caribbean social mobility system. One was allowed to move. However, the caste system is operational in marriages. Because of the caste system and the concept of untouchables, they converted to Christianity and Islam since it was considered more prestigious and allowed social mobility. The East Indians is at first slow to enter into society because of fear and distrust created by the Europeans, but over time, the East Indian integrates and acquires education. The East Indians thus enter into modern empowerment factors. Education becomes mandatory for East Indian families. Today, the East Indian is included in the socio-political landscape of half the Caribbean. The East Indian constitutes a race minority, and they promote race politics in the Caribbean. Indigenous perspectives, the Amerindians were the initial owners of land resources in the Caribbean. However, one group after another alienated, exploited, and displaced the Amerindian groups. Today, the Amerindians are considered a minority group in the Caribbean. E.g., in Suriname, Jamaica, Dominica, St. Vincent, Belize have a high concentration of disenfranchised Amerindians. Amerindians are invisible. They hold no socio-political status and need empowerment opportunities. The Amerindians are oftentimes the focus of the United Nations' attention. All indigenous groups occupy the United Nations' attention since these persons are important for global heritage. In 2013, the United Nations assigned the Amazon forest as a World Heritage Site, and Amerindian artifacts, e.g., Mayan Temple, have come to be protected. Module 2, Specific Objective 7, Roles and Functions of Mass Media. The mass media is a diverse concept that encompasses all means, traditional and electronic, perspectives of dissemination of information. The mass media, regardless of evolution, performs the same functions and holds the same value to Caribbean development. The mass media can both advance and retard Caribbean development. Functions of media: to inform, educate, sensitize, and create awareness, to entertain, helps to make us visible to others. It enables a voice for the people. As an element of visibility, it allows a form of identity to be created for a region. Trinidad and Tobago, land of soca. Media creates a sense of international identity and allows people to participate in society, empowerment, and to gain restitution or social justice. The media/press via the news can act as a watchdog of democracy. The press safeguards the freedom and rights of a people by promoting accountability and transparency in the use of power. The media can work in favor of creating a cultural identity for people in society. The media is an employer, promoting upstream and downstream industries, stimulating economic activities. The media allows interaction among people, allowing consensus, collaboration, and harmony building. It is society. From a regional perspective, there is unification and integration. The media is an important agent for safeguarding a nation's current level of development. A warning for future disasters such as a tsunami. Importance of mass media. Impact of internet penetration indicates the percentage of internet users in any country, and it shows the relationship between the number of internet users in each country with its demographic data. Technology as a factor that promotes development. PC is a glorified media promoter to promote FDI through creating positive international reputation and visibility, to allow talented people to have an avenue for expression, e.g., art, to help raise social awareness in events in society, such as lifestyles and opportunities that may be available. By having knowledge, people are empowered to make informed decisions. Opportunities to empower, such as the mobile clinic and library, are made aware by the mass media. This allows people to participate and access opportunities to enhance learning/educational opportunities in the formal classroom setting, providing alternative avenues for learning. Any kind of education, social, academic, political, adds to development, to build morale of a people through televising of matches and accomplishments on a national basis. There is positive propaganda. 2. Promote psychological wellness of your people through entertainment and recreation, giving people a chance to get psychological equilibrium. To promote the democratic process, i.e., it becomes a champion for transparency and accountability. To promote social justice issues in the Caribbean, the likelihood of someone being exploited is minimized due to publicity. Via the press, opportunities for informing the public about important matters relating to well-being are created. The media is tasked with a responsibility to the people to ensure their general good. As such, the press is a powerful tool in shaping opinions in society, to act as a platform for lobbying. Hence, the mass media works counter to cultural imperialism, potential damages of mass media, the reporting of too much bad news, crime, social injustice, poor governance can change a nation's reputation. By deterring FDI, tourism, and promoting internal doubt, this can trigger migration, leading to a brain drain, reduced economic activity and taxes, long-term negative impacts to tourism sector. Tourism is a trendy industry. As soon as the magnetism of a place is lost, it is hard to restore it. Some Caribbean countries are even blacklisted as having a lot of crime, loss of confidence among the people, and a loss of entrepreneurial culture. Too much robberies reported in the news will influence people's decisions to open a new business. Negative aid situations can be created in the presence of rampant crime. The mass media can work counter to peace by promoting panic at public, uncertainty. The erosion of culture can occur. Hence, cultural imperialism can then be sped up. The mass media distracts, which negatively affects productivity. The mass media can destroy local. Caribbean playwriting didn't get off the ground because of a prolific American film industry. The mass media can allow for a greater outflow of cash from society. Commerce, online shopping. Caribbean people want the best quality for the best prices. This leads to unemployment in the distributional sector. Module 2, Specific Objective 8, Social Justice, is an attempt by any society to promote equity of place, treatment, and opportunities for all classes or groups within societies. Classism is the creation and portrayal of socioeconomic classes or groups within society. Whenever there is a formation of a class, there is polarization. Classism and the creation of groups essentially perpetuate a situation where social injustice is created, where the human rights and freedom of a group are taken away. Classism holds a historical precursor, social stratification. If classism exists in society, the human development paradigm will never exist. The sustainable development paradigm is also built upon ensuring equity and empowerment, so two of the pillars for achieving sustainable development are nullified. If there is to be progress, a society must place human dignity at the forefront. There are several notions, avenues, and strategies for acquiring social justice. Welfare system, an effort to restore social justice by attempting to create socio-economic equity and reduce polarization. Concepts of social justice based on ideas about welfare deliberately focus on the distribution of resources, i.e. distributive justice in a society which leads to well-being and satisfaction. The idea for social justice sees the need for marginalized groups to experience more of the material rewards of society. This normally refers to socioeconomic conditions such as wages, equality of job opportunity, a more humane education, system, and housing. Obviously, this means not treating people equally, but treating unequals unequally. The poorer groups are given more subsidies and opportunities to upgrade their standard of living. Welfare is a notion of end quote being fair, end quote, which does not emphasize equality or sameness. Critics of the welfare model, however, say that it is very expensive and leads to welfare dependency. And to varying degrees, it is unfair to other groups which have to be taxed to support these measures. Some people may become so dependent on welfare handouts that they are unable to break out of this dependency and achieve self-reliance. Those who criticize welfare policies as quote, handouts, end quote, which are too burdensome on taxpayers, tend to see only a narrow picture. Improving a family's economic circumstances goes a long way towards improving the nutrition and health of a family. Natural rights, the privileges that a person is born with. Natural rights not vary from place to place. Every person, regardless of sex, race, etc., is entitled to natural rights. So natural rights come closest to the Geneva Understanding of Human Rights. The UN Declaration of Human Rights goes much further than natural rights to end quote, entitlements, end quote, which people should have in order to live in a just society. They have more to do with social living than basic human rights, and it seems to have become the responsibility of governments and international organizations to ensure they are enforced. These rights are really high priority areas, which seem to be necessary for all people to enjoy similar benefits. For example, civil and political rights, the right to freedom of expression, to assemble and form associations, to participate in the political process, and to run for public office. Economic and social rights. The right to education, healthcare, fair wages, mutual advantage. This is built upon reciprocity and truism. Hence, mutual advantage is important when it comes to being a member of society. In order to be a member, there are certain rules a person must acknowledge in an unwritten social contract. If the rules are not obeyed, there will be legal consequences. This reflects the functionalist perspective. However, it does not approve of welfare provisions for the poor unless the poor are prepared to reciprocate by taking advantage of welfare and growing out of poverty, which would be mutually beneficial to the state and its citizens. This is a view of social justice, which is based on merit rather than need or rights. The mutual advantage model of social justice accepts that all citizens are inherently equal and those who are experiencing an inequitable level of socioeconomic well-being should be helped to do so. In return, however, they should resolve to grasp the opportunities provided and reduce welfare dependency, since those of the poorer socioeconomic groups are less likely to want to invest in long-term training for rewards several years later. Hence, they are less likely to be helped by this model. This way of thinking about social justice values the goals and norms of mainstream society, such as a capitalist system of social and economic relations. Social justice requires social, economic, and political equalization of opportunities. The achievement of these opportunities is challenged by our history of division. Social justice, as a paradigm, is built upon a human conscience. However, there is always a situation where man is hateful towards his fellow man. Structures need to be put in place to promote social justice as part of our legal framework. This links to the United Nations Charter for Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These human rights are called the inalienable rights of man, and they constitute the Geneva Convention. There are several articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 3, every person has a right to life, liberty, and security. Article 5, no one shall be subject to torture or cruel, degrading punishment. In the Caribbean, there are several social justice issues. This means that a portion of the population will be disempowered and disenfranchised. There are several issues attracting negative international attention. Gender discrimination. Sexism refers to prejudices, stereotypes, and acts of discrimination against people based on their sex and not on individual merits or failures. The assumption that a man is the breadwinner in a house or even the head of the household is sexist, when the only criterion used to come to this conclusion is that he is a man. It is difficult to identify sexism in daily life because it is part of our gender socialization. Ageism, an attitude towards mainly the elderly, which treats them as objects with little worth. E.g., ageism perpetuates the generation gap and reduces the possibility of healthy, mutually respectful relations between the generations. The older generation has much to contribute in homes, workplaces, and public life based on their accumulated knowledge, experience, and wisdom. In effect, though, the majority are sidelined, made to retire, and not seem as a resource to tap. What compounds this problem is that older persons tend to accept the prejudices which mainstream society has about them. They begin to behave like spectators to life, acting out a self-fulfilling prophecy. Racism. Racism is the negative or positive value placed on a group of people who belong to a particular race or have a certain skin color because they are perceived to be inferior or superior. Creedism refers to any form of prejudice, stereotype, or active discrimination based on religion. Such beliefs and actions are based on the idea that a particular religion is inferior or superior. All countries subscribe to freedom of religion as a basic human right. However, on a personal level, among individuals there will be examples of religious prejudices and stereotypes because of our socialization into believing whatever group we belong to is superior. E.g., there is centuries of creedism practiced by the European traditions, in which Christianity was thought to be superior to the other religions in the land. The removal of the Trinity Cross as Trinidad and Tobago's highest national award was largely a response to the objections of Hindu groups, who viewed it as a Christian symbol. Sexual orientation. This refers to one's, mating in, preferences. Bisexuality means equality of preference for men and women as sex partners. Transgender people were either born as men and are changed into women, usually by surgical operations. E.g., one case that made international headlines in 2014 concerned a transgender 16-year-old Jamaican named Dwayne who was murdered after being recognized at a party in female dress. His body was dumped in bushes and his murders have not been brought to justice. Worse still, for many Jamaicans, Dwayne was not the victim of an unprovoked assault, but had brought about his own death by deceiving the men whom he danced with until he was unmasked by a woman acquaintance. Marshall, 2014. If a person's human rights are taken away from them, there is promotion of exclusion rather than inclusion. There are certain prominent examples that can be cited. The stern, anti-TEF, homosexual position taken in Jamaica, racism and race politics, Amerindians' position, minorities, are groups that are awarded an inferior/unequal position and negative quality of life. Any kind of minoritization reduces expansion of choices, equity, etc. Overcoming social injustice. Government must play an important role to empower people and restore social justice. There needs to be positive discrimination/affirmative action, i.e., a nation has to try to empower so they have a voice to achieve development. A